After the year we've had, we're looking for every kind of sweet and healthy blessing we possibly can. And, we look at each other, we say a good yontiv, we say Shana Tova Mituka, may it be a good year, may it be a sweet year. But one of the things we don't say, may it be a normal year. Because we have no idea what that means anymore. On Kol Nidre, I'm going to talk about racism and anti-Semitism. On Yom Kippur morning, I'll explore the phenomenon of masks. The masks we wear to protect, the masks we hide behind. But this morning, as we begin the new year of 5781, we will address the experience that has forever changed the way we live. People talk about the new normal. Well, it seems that the new normal is simply that we have to get used to sudden and unexpected change. After 6 months of a pandemic, you'd think we'd get used to abrupt change. Our Yiddish bubbies and zadies would say, man tracht und Gott lacht. Our man plans and God laughs. Our grand plans and well-honed schedules can all crumble. But we know it is no laughing matter. What kind of year has it been? Well, how about the most divisive political season in memory? International relations, China and Russia and Iran all trying to interfere in our elections. We've suffered from record heat waves, and since it's Colorado, the very next day, record lows. We've had disastrous forest fires that choke our skies, stinging our eyes with smoke and ash, struggling to breathe, sucking air through a suffocating mask, fogging our glasses, making us gasp, businesses tottering on bankruptcy, millions relying on government decency, dependency. Don't call it charity. They're just trying to pay the rent. Schools and shuls are struggling to connect with students and congregants. Isolation, frustration, quarantine, Zooming, face masks and asthma attacks, technological glitches, itchy britches, gyms closed, tight clothes, pants no longer fitting, Netflix binging, temperature checks, Zoom bombing smart Alex, squirting and rubbing sanitizer sauce, chapping our hands red at a high cost. And if that wasn't enough, racists, fascists, bigots, and idiots that still diss Jews and spout hateful views about Israel. And so while we still have a few months left in 2020, take a breath and shout hallelujah. Thank God 5780 is now officially over. And I dropped the mic, but I am wearing a lapel. The escalating toll from the COVID-19 pandemic is heartbreaking. The virus has caused or contributed to the deaths of 200,000 Americans and millions around the world. It has shaken this proud nation to the core. There are tens of millions unemployed, businesses and schools closed, people isolated and quarantined, weddings, graduations, anniversaries, and precious family milestones have been postponed or shrunk to small gatherings. For goodness sakes, just going out on a date or trying to come to services is such a major ordeal that many are not able to come or to risk to make a chance. Temple Sinai is one of the few synagogues in the entire nation with in-person services. And even we are restricted to 100 people at a time for the high holidays. It's not necessary to go into details about all the disastrous consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic because you are all well aware of them. We've been living them for these 6 months, and there's no clear end in sight. Suffice it to say that this has been a financial and a social catastrophe. Some are saying that the pandemic has created a new normal. Well, it's not the first time we've experienced a crisis that established a new normal. Just last week, I spoke about the 9/11, the date commemorating the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in Pennsylvania. I noted that it too created a new normal. Never again would we be taking commercial airline flights thinking it would be a breeze. Over time, we've gotten used to showing up 2 or 3 hours early for flights in order to navigate the maze of security checks, taking our shoes off and walking through X-ray machines before boarding. Now we're used to being searched and going through scanners every time we enter a state or federal building, and we take it for granted that while security agencies monitor calls and the internet to make our lives safer, our privacy and our personal information has been compromised. That too is our new normal. The challenge for us is how to adapt to a new normal. Jews are civilization's oldest people in faith. For over 3,500 years, we've experienced, endured, and overcome plagues and pogroms, wars and exiles, and every other challenge known to humanity. And at the core of Judaism is an indomitable will and a clear-sighted wisdom, because we know how to adjust, how to create, how to improvise, and how to survive. And we do so because we refuse to give up. This spirit is ingrained in our ancestral DNA and our language. The biblical Hebrew word for crisis is mishbar. It comes from the Hebrew word, the root shavar, meaning to break. A declension of this verb, mashber, describes the breach in the womb during childbirth. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs puts it, the Jewish reflex is to see difficult times as birth pains. Something new is being born, even during a crisis. What Sachs expressed, we have all felt. A crisis is not the time for despair. This is a time to respond, to rebuild, to renew. No, not just to renew and rebuild what was. Rather, this is the time to build something new and better. The Jewish determination to create a better life is based on our deep-seated belief that each human life is precious, b'tselem Elohim, a part of God's sacred creation. That belief inspires a spirit that drives us to search for cures and solutions. It is an attitude that is not satisfied merely to survive a crisis, but to learn and teach lessons from a crisis, lessons that will prepare future generations, helping them to overcome unforeseen challenges. That indomitable spirit, that creative wit and tenacious drive to respond with positive determination is quite evident in the Jewish people, and most significantly, here at Temple Sinai with you and your families. As the full extent of the pandemic became evident, we here in Sinai, we immediately developed a slate of online programming to connect with people of all ages and backgrounds, from toddler and preschool, virtual crafts, classes, and song sessions to Hebrew and Jewish studies for our religious school students. And we not only maintained our adult educational offerings, we increased them. Most inspiring of all are the attitudes and reactions of the couples, the families, and the individuals who had to move or drastically alter plans for wedding days or b'nai mitzvah services, naming celebrations, and anniversaries. Large, elaborate celebrations that had been planned with hundreds of guests were adjusted to intimate Hamish gatherings with a chuppah in the backyard or in the front yard or on someone's deck or porch. B'nai mitzvah families who would have had family and guests in from all over the country filling this Zwerin sanctuary or filling the Abrams family chapel, they were downsized to just a few dozen guests or fewer. Loved ones had to tune in via live stream or Facebook, and those that did show up had to spread out just like you are and wearing masks. And guess what? I did not hear even one word of moaning, no woe is me from brides and grooms or B'nai Mitzvah students or their families. In every single case, couples, families, students, and friends expressed such gratitude. They felt lucky to have love, lucky to have options, lucky to have a supportive community that did not lock the doors of the synagogue to them. The values, maturity, and positive attitudes displayed by our families is proof that despite the dire predictions of doomsday schriers, the future is in very good hands indeed, as the Who once sang in the 60s, the kids are all right. Anyone younger than 40 has to look up who the Who are. Now you can Google who the Who, and then they'll get all confused. While it is one thing to put off or adjust for a celebration, funerals are another story altogether. When a loved one dies, the Jewish tradition of gathering to honor the deceased and comfort the mourners has been proven to be an essential part of our psychological and emotional well-being. But indoor funeral services have been forbidden, and even attending the cemetery services is limited. Likewise, the pandemic made it impossible to provide the comforting embrace of family and friends at Shiva. Again, instead of despairing the situation or breaking down in disappointment, we created alternatives to meet the needs of the mourners and to honor the deceased. After a loss, we need to remember that we should never doubt the miraculous regenerative powers of God's miracle of life. I want to share with you a very short, sweet little story about the Methuselah tree. Some of you have learned about it already because it's gotten some international acclaim. In 1963, an archaeologist who was excavating Herod's palace at the top of Masada, many of you have been there, found a clay jar that contained date seeds. Now these are seeds that date back about 2,000 years ago. Now in the Torah, dates were among the 7 species that were singled out for special blessings. That includes wheat and barley and grape, fig, pomegranates, olive, especially for its oil, and date, especially for its honey. They're all mentioned in Deuteronomy as a symbolic part of the blessings for the land of Israel. The phrase, a land flowing with milk and honey, refers to date honey, not to honey from bees. Well, dates were prized both for their delicious taste as well as for their acclaimed medicinal benefits, because they could be enjoyed both fresh and dried. And dates were invaluable as a trading commodity. And generations of our ancestors depended on the bounty of the date palm to survive and thrive. Unfortunately, the date groves were decimated long, long ago by wars. Invading armies chopped the trees down for their war machines and to starve the local economy. And that would have been the end of the story. But God's blessings and human ingenuity are miraculous partners. 6 of the ancient seeds that were found on Masada sat on a shelf at Bar-Ilan University in Tel Aviv. Sat on that shelf for 40 years, mind you. They were all but forgotten, but then Dr. Sarah Salon of the Hadassah Medical Center and an agricultural expert, Elaine Soloway of the Arava Institute, which Denver helps to support, decided to see if the seeds could grow. So what they did, they took some of these seeds and they soaked them in hot water, and then they planted them in a nutrient-rich mixture. And in a few months, one began to sprout. And after a few years, it had grown 6.5 feet. And so they took it and they planted it at Kibbutz Keturah, where it flowered. Now, flowered indicated that it was male, that it would thereby bear pollen, but not fruit. So they named the date tree Methuselah, after the oldest biblical character, Methuselah, who lived to the age of 969. More of the ancient seeds were subsequently nurtured back to life, and some were female. And they were then pollinated with the Methuselah pollen, and just a few months ago, they produced fruit. After nearly 2,000 years, the famous Judean date, which had been feared extinct, lost forever, once again lives. Its delicious fruit will once again nurture and delight us. The miraculous rebirth of the Methuselah tree is a metaphor for the rebuilding and the regeneration of our world after this COVID-19 pandemic is over. The psalmist sang, Tzadik katamar yifrach. The righteous will blossom forth as a date palm tree. After a crisis, there is rebirth. We celebrate the renewal of creation every morning, the beginning of our worship. We say Yotzer, or the act of creation happening every day, B'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. Every single day, God makes creation, and we are God's partners in it. And that act of creating every day, that is not a new normal, that is our eternal normal. No one could have predicted the year that we've just endured. Still, we have all learned invaluable lessons. Never again will we take for granted the pleasure of visiting with family and friends. Yes, we have learned that we can maintain communication and bonds through the internet, but we also have learned how much we miss each other, how much we need each other. Perhaps we'll be more willing to take time off from work and other responsibilities in order to attend a simcha, to go visit a loved one. I hope that's the case. And I certainly hope that we will make it a priority to attend a Shiva gathering, because we all know now more than ever how the physical presence of friends and family can help us after a loss. And while we should continue to wash our hands diligently and stay away from others when we're suffering a cold, I do look forward to the time in which we can give each other big hugs. Yes, the unexpected will continue to happen. However, now we have a greater appreciation for relationships and experiences that transcend time and place. Charles Darwin once said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." To which Stephen Hawking adjusted a little bit. He said, "Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change." So let's be smart. Until the pandemic is over, we'll continue to be safe. We'll continue to wear our masks and keep reasonable distances from one another. We'll be smart, but we need not despair. At the end of his life, Moses exhorts the children of Israel and their future leaders with this essential message. He said, "Chizku ve'imtzu al tiru." Be strong and be courageous, and do not fear or be intimidated, because Adonai, your God, is with you. God will not allow you to fail. God will not forsake you. Yes, we need to be strong. We need to be courageous. Yes, we need to learn the lessons from the past and adjust to whatever becomes the new normal. And we also have to remember that life cannot be lived in fear. Rather, we must live with love. Ken hi ratzon. May it be God's will. Amen.